March 13th, 2009, Ms. Katrina Valentine tendered her resignation to the State Allocation Board and to the chair of the State Allocation Board, and I want to officially acknowledge that and receive and put into our record for today's meeting Ms. Valentine's resignation. Lisa, when you get a chance, you can come take this letter and have it put into the record, okay? Minutes. Where are you, Rob? I don't see you.
I'm hiding over here behind Lisa.
Uh-huh.
No, the minutes for the last three board meetings, March 25th, the 11th, and February 25th, are before you and ready for your approval.
Okay. I'm sorry, one more thing. I apologize, board members and those of you in the audience. For those of you who could not get into the room but want to watch, we are being broadcast live, both video and audio, at the OPSC homepage. Rob, what's the address for that? www.
opsc.dgs.ca.gov.
And we're also being, okay. Why was I given two addresses that are the same? I guess that's the address you go to, the OPSC website. Okay, with that, the minutes. Are there any questions or comments from board members or members of the public on the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting? We do have questions. Ms. Moore.
I just received these minutes this morning, and I have not had the opportunity to review them. And because while I can abstain from March 25th because I was not here, I would like additional time to be able to read the other 2 minutes.
Without objection, we're going to give, would you like additional time today, or would you like us to take them up at the next meeting? What's your pleasure?
How about the next meeting?
Okay, so we'll take them up at the next meeting. Which ones would you be comfortable, are there any minutes we can dispose of today?
The minutes of February 25th and March 11th have been in your packets since they were released. The 25th came out later. So.
Oh, I stand corrected then.
That's okay. Should we put the minutes from the 25th over, Kathleen, and then approve the other minutes? Is that? I'm flexible. Whatever you want to do.
My error then, if they were there.
Mr. Lowenthal, did you have a question about the minutes? Okay.
For the purposes of moving the agenda, I'll move the minutes for...
why don't we put the minutes for the 25th over?
That's
but
fine.
Let's approve the balance of them. Is that acceptable? Can you make that motion, Mr. Harvey?
That was going to be my motion.
We have a second? Second. Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right, so we've got the minutes. Mr. Cook, you want to give us your executive officer report?
Yeah, yes, I would. Well, we've got some good news to report at this board. The recent bond sale was effected on, is providing $541 million to our projects from Proposition 1D. And additional funds have been made available to fund health and safety projects that were exempted from the freeze. Our staff has been working endlessly with the, and that's in a good way, with the Department of Finance and the State Treasurer's Office, and so that we can expedite funding to school districts for the projects. And also, the State Treasurer has been conducting a sale of Build America bonds, and we look forward to having additional funds to provide to districts in the near future. Also, on fund release priority, this board has adopted as its formal policy is first in, first out for these for funding school district projects. That discussion has also been carried on at the implementation committee. Implementation committee has affirmed that approach and does not wish to differ from first in, first out for school project funding. Also, I wanted to share with you the results of our first webcast of our board meeting. We had roughly 125 viewers out there, and you will note in my comments some of the comments that we got back from viewers out there. We had people in far-flung places in the state of California that found it to be a great benefit. They did not have to engage in travel. They didn't have to take the expense. They didn't have to take the time, and yet they could see everything that we did here. And we got some very enthusiastic responses. And anyway, just a nice step forward in transparency. And then finally, we have two sets of regulations that have been approved by the Office of Administrative Law and are One is the original emergency regulation that we did to unplug the clock for the 18-month time limit. That became effective on April 9th, and we just got notified today that our critically overcrowded schools and charter time limit extensions were approved today by the Office of Administrative Law.
Mr. Cook, if there are any other emergency regulations this body needs to consider as we move forward with the school facilities program in light of our funding situations, I'd like you to call that to our attention. I have another announcement I want to make that builds upon what Rob said. Ms. Jones, could you come distribute copies of these press releases to the board members here, and if they're not here, to their staff? I want to publicly acknowledge the great work done by our State Treasurer, Bill Lockyer, and his staff. Today, they received orders and closed, I believe closing is the correct term, on over $6.85 billion in general obligation bonds. They made California the first state in the nation to sell the Build America bonds that have recently been authorized by the Obama administration. This is a major step forward for us. It's going to result in everybody that has a fund release request before us right now. They're going to get their requests funded. I can't tell you exactly when, but it's going to happen soon, quite soon. And it is also going to allow us and the state of California to restart over 5,000 public works projects that all got put on hold. So this is great news for the state. It's great news for all of our constituents. And we're very pleased that the Treasurer was able to do this. Department of Finance staff has been working very closely with the Treasurer, and we just think he did a great job. $5.2 billion are Build America bonds. The other $1.7 billion are taxable bonds that will be used for stem cell research, low-income housing, and high-speed rail programs, among others. So you'll be hearing more about this. You can go to the Treasurer's website to get a copy of the press release I just gave our board members. You can also go to the Governor's website to get the Governor's press release. And finally, you can go to the Department of Finance website to see a list of the 5,000 projects that are going to be approved to be restarted. And I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do, but I'm recommending Finance come forward with a budget letter sometime soon that'll be giving more instructions to folks about how we're going to proceed. So this is good news. I would add a cautionary note. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that our economy continues to have some storm clouds on the horizon. We don't see yet that we're at the end of this recession. Department of Finance will be updating state revenues and our economic forecast for the May revision, which will come this year after the special election on May 19th. And, you know, we're going to have to see what happens with the special election, what happens with the May revise. So our fiscal situation may change again by the end of May or early June, but I think for right now we can all be really pleased with the work that we've accomplished up to this point.
I'd just like to make a couple of comments. As you know, I've commented on bond sales virtually every meeting, and I'd like to comment on this one. I've talked to a couple of brokers in the last couple of days. They could sell more. They could sell more. And I wish the Treasurer's office would, on a regular basis, report this. Now, what's also astounding is that some of those bonds, as you may point it out, are not tax-free bonds. And when you look at the actual rate of return, the percentages that you are getting on those, they're not anything special. They're, as a matter of fact, a broker will tell you, they're sort of the equivalent of a corporate bond, except people actually believe that the state of California is good for it. So
How on earth did they ever get that idea?
that's what the market is saying. And we all know, though, that the Treasurer has asked for some government guarantee for some short-term financing and other things, but the market likes us. The other thing I'd like to say is I think it's, you know, Senator Lowenthal's comment that the market doesn't trust anything else may be part of it, but that's the reality. The only other thing I'd like to say is that, and this affects us indirectly in terms of the economy, I wish I could send this directly to the national administration. one of the single biggest problems, and I get it from my constituents all the time, is there's no credit. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal just the other day or the day before which said that these banks who've gotten our money to the tune of billions of dollars are actually loaning less now than they were last fall. So anything that our administration could do, who has some real power, to try to get these banks to start lending, because what happens is part of the problem with these businesses not being able to do more and then pay more taxes so we have more revenues is they can't get financing. We always hear constantly that I hear from businesses that have credit lines cut, so that is an impediment. But anyway, I'm thrilled, as we all are, with that sale.
Thank you, Senator Wyland. Did other members? Ms. Moore.
Can I think it's great news, and thank you for, I do, I'm red. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I think that's great news. Fabulous. I just want to make sure that I understand how the bond funds are being flowing out in terms of fund releases. And maybe it's a moot point if what you're saying, Tom, is that all of the projects that sit on the unfunded, on the list up until what date will be funded. Do we know that, what date that is?
Well, first of all, let me just say a couple things. I'd had a lot of concern expressed to me by some school districts and advocates that they were concerned about the $541 million, that it was going to be just Prop 1D money. And the reason why that was is because those are the bonds the treasurer sold. Nobody knew that he was going to be able to sell as much as he could, so it was sort of like it was all happening. It's like, well, let's sell the 1Ds. But I think that the concerns that might have created vis-a-vis the first in, first, I think this is all sort of being ameliorated now by the fact that we just sold these $5 billion in Build America bonds. And I've been told by my staff that there are going to be sufficient proceeds to fund everybody that's in line right now that has come in for a fund release, that they're all going to get taken care of. In addition, there's going to be, I don't know the exact dollar amount, but there will be significant dollars available for those people that have received an apportionment but who haven't come in yet for a fund release. So I think we have, really cleared away about 85, maybe 90% of the concern that I think we had as a body in terms of were our apportionments going to get funded. Mm-hmm. So, it doesn't mean that that our problem is fixed. Mm-hmm. It just means that March and April were really good months for us, and we're going to be able to get a lot of the bond money out to the schools, and that's a good thing. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Kathleen. I think you might have had some other questions.
I think what you're saying does ameliorate a portion of the concern. I think there is some confusion around what first in, first out means, and that is, I'll try and state it how I understand it, and then I would like, if I am not understanding it correctly, if I could be corrected so that everybody knows the lay of the land. And as I understand it, it's first in, first out with a 50-05 now. Not that you had a 50-05 previously. It's that is being reconfirmed, and that those are the projects that will be funded.
No, that's not.
Okay,
that's
so
not
could
the
you state
understanding.
how it is?
And for most of our board, they don't know what a 50-05 is, but that's the geek name for. Sorry, Kathleen, for our fund release.
I love being a geek.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Anyway, and that's a part of our regulations, but districts issue, when they've met the requirements, they bring in a fund release form to our office. And under normal circumstances, pardon me? Yeah, they make certain certifications on that form, and they have to have 50% of their project under contract when they come in with that form. And first in, first out means that is the original 50-05 that form that they brought in to us. And there are approximately $1.4 billion worth of fund release requests before us. And we are taking care of the first $541 million of the Prop 1D projects.
Okay. So if I am on the list, and I am on the list as having submitted a 50-05 and I said I was under contract in order to do that back before all this transpired, then you are going to go down that list and fund those and provide the fund release for those projects in the date order they were received.
That's correct.
And this is all pretty new to me. So if a district was certified and had done that, then all this occurred not anything due to the district's actions. They now, let's say, they didn't know when these bonds were going to be sold or anything. We told them that they were frozen. Now they may have canceled some of these, and so they're now you're saying they may have to recertify again or something because they can't. Will they lose their place?
We are going through a very streamlined recertification process for those funds, just to confirm that what we had.
Because it wasn't their fault.
It certainly wasn't their fault. There was a statutory obligation that districts have contracts in place in order to receive a fund release.
Right. But now it may take a little bit of time for them to do it. They're going to go to the end of the line?
We have, how many projects? There are a couple hundred projects that are involved here, and probably about 80 districts that are involved here. We have made contact with all of those districts and are asking just very, very simple one-page confirmation that all of their certifications are valid, and we're moving along.
But they may take some time to do that because of our action. They may have had to cancel some of those contracts. Now they have to start again, not because of because of us. And now what's going to happen to them when you contact them? So they're going to say, well, we'll have to redo these contracts. It'll take me a little bit of time. Are they going to go to the end of the line is what I'm saying.
Well, so far the response has been positive, and everyone's been able to recertify so far.
Got it. I'm just saying I want to protect those districts. It wasn't really their fault. They did the certification. We now told them we're freezing the money. You'd better protect yourself. They protected themselves. Now we're saying the money's here. Give us right away. There's a disconnect then. We just have to make sure that we don't place this onerous burden on them and that they lose, where they were if it takes a short period of time to recertify.
Mr. Senator Lowenthal, I think that's an extremely important concern. I know Mr. Duffy had, you may want, if you would like to talk about that, you're welcome to. I would like to try to pass a couple of business items while we do have the members here, but I want to just say I think that's a very important concern. And I don't want to minimize it on any level, but that said, I think the good news really is that we just sold so many bonds that I think that whether you were number 10 in line or number 110 in line right now, I'm not sure that's going to matter anymore. Okay. But I think to your point that, now we're making them jump through another hoop. I'm going to defer to people that know the legalities of all this better than I, but I just know that having gone through the most extraordinary circumstance we ever had in this program, it didn't surprise me that there might have to be something like this just to make sure that we're dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's.
I understand that.
But I think your concern is an important one, and I think we're going to get it taken care of. Mr. Smoot and Mr. Duffy, did you want to talk on this point? Tom, please come forward.
And Mr. Chairman,
Senator
I'd
Hancock.
like to be recognized at some point, but I'm
sorry.
delighted to hear them too.
I apologize. We're going to hear from Senator Hancock first, Tom.
First of all, I do think this is good news. It's wonderful that we can move ahead, that we can fund everything that's there. My concern is a little add-on that I'd like to see if it's possible to accommodate, and that is that I'm extremely interested in our modernization and our new building being as energy efficient and as green as we can possibly make it. For many of these districts, they won't do anything like this again for 25 or more years. We do have $100 million in the bond for CHIPS, green and healthy schools. Some of these districts may have come in requesting the CHIPS money, but we're also finding, and we've discussed this with the staff, that we haven't really done a lot of very vigorous outreach about the availability of this money. And many of the things that you can get CHIPS certification for can be done without going out and redesigning anything. It's using ecologically friendly flooring material, paint, opening windows, that kind of thing. And districts can get between 2 and 11% additional money as a grant if they decide to do that. And I'm wondering if it would be possible for us to simply send a letter out to districts informing them that that's a possibility and where they can find out more about the program in the SAB.
That's a great suggestion, Senator Rob. Did you have any comments? Can we send a letter out?
We can certainly, pardon me, we can certainly send out a letter to districts. We also have, our state architect is present with us today, and I know Dave Thorman, has done a great deal of work in the fall developing a grid-neutral guidebook for school districts that I would be happy to attach to that as well to get out to districts.
We have that money in the OPSC budget. That's a lot of photocopying.
It's actually published. It's published electronically, so I can send out a letter with a link.
All the better. Spoken as a true finance guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe the CHIPS checklist too, because when you see the things you can get points for, and some of them are so easy to accommodate, that could kind of get people's imaginations going, especially if, as Senator Lowenthal indicated, they may have to make some minor tweaks to their plans anyway.
That's a great suggestion, Rob. Can you see that gets done, and can you send a hard copy of those communications to each one of the board members so they can see what's going out to the districts?
Certainly.
Great, thank you so much.
Mr. Duffy.
Here we go. So, Senator Lowenthal, you articulated what I think I had to both Mr. Shee and Mr. Cook, that there may be a district, and there may be more than one, that have basically ceased to contract and stopped work, but they had, in good faith, entered a contract and supplied the documentation prior.
Right.
That in that, they still need this project, still have eligibility, and as you said, through no fault of their own, they've gotten into this dire circumstance. Our suggestion is that districts, and we've provided a letter to you. It's a 2-page letter, and basically the heart of it is the paragraph that's second to last on at the bottom, where we identify that for this situation and going into the future to help projects get on the street more quickly, that you revise the process of requiring the 5005, and upon the action of this board to apportion funds, to basically send a communique to the Comptroller's office to release funds. The district will be audited. Every district project is audited, and in the end, you will be able to see the contracts that the district has entered into. Now, we know that districts, and you were just talking and dialoguing about construction contracts, but districts enter into contracts before projects even get to you. They enter into contracts with architects and engineers. They enter into contracts to purchase properties. So they are expending money and can demonstrate that these are active and viable projects. So our suggestion, and I won't belabor it, our suggestion is let's make it go faster, and it would take care of the situation that is the current situation that Senator Lowenthal was mentioning, as well as, I think, helping the dollars get out there more quickly to projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. Smoot?
Good afternoon. Lyle Smoot, representing the Los Angeles Unified School District. I just want to say, I agree with what Tom said, but I want to go a little bit further. The recertification is not a simple document. The certification itself, you can sign it, I suppose, fairly simply, but you have to also attach the first page and the signature page of the construction contracts to the 5005 recertification and mail them to the office within 48 hours of this request. Los Angeles Unified has recently received 48 of these requests. We have money. I can't see any reason why districts like us, that everyone knows, why can't they just certify that, we've got money, there's no change to our original 5005. Why do we have to go through this process of pulling copies of 48 contracts that were previously submitted and going through that process? I mean, in 48 hours, we're going to have to take 2 or 3 staff members and go through this process. So I just ask that somehow or other, if we're going to have to go through this, it needs to be simplified for districts that have money.
Rob, can you look into simplifying it and extending the 48 hours to 72?
Thank you very much.
I will simplify it according to Lyle's ability to simplify my life, but we'll.
Ms. Moore.
I still have a concern on this, and I think that we need to be very clear with districts. I think it's very good that we may have more money that ultimately makes this a non-issue. But for right now, we have $541 million that goes out to school districts. I do not want, I as one board member, and maybe it's a policy decision that we all need to weigh in on, is I don't want a district that went through this situation where they may have ceased a contract because of the actions of the Pooled Money Investment Board and the actions of this board, receive this 48-hour request, not be able to certify within 48 hours because indeed they ceased a contract and they may have to re-enter a contract, and that is virtually impossible in 48 hours, to be overstepped to somebody else getting funding. To me, then they have been injured by us twice. Once, not through anyone's personal fault, but because of the financial situation, they're injured. And then we injure them again by saying, by ceasing your contract, which you had to do in some circumstances, we're going to pass over you to somebody else that didn't have to. I think that's a very important policy decision, and I would want to walk out of this room being clear today as to how we're going to treat districts.
Rob, I think this is obviously an issue that has struck a lot of concern. So why don't we take a moment here and talk about what our options are. I'm not clear as to whether or not this is an issue that can be resolved by this body taking an action, whether it can be resolved with regulations, or whether, in fact, we would need to have an amendment to a bill and get a statutory change. I thought the under contract requirement was a statutory issue, and if that's the case, perhaps we can get at it by getting a bill amended so that we can fix this going forward. Because I think that Ms. Moore raises a really good point. We certainly don't want to do anything to make it more difficult for schools. We're all victims of circumstance here. Nobody saw this coming. I'm sure the last thing the State Allocation Board wanted to do was to be put in this situation where we had to hold things up, not make apportionments, create waiting lists. And, obviously we want to get the money out as fast as we can, but we also want to make sure that we comply with the law. So could you please give us your thoughts on this? What, if anything, that we could do today? What would we need to do going forward in order to address some of the issues that have been raised by the board members?
Yeah. You're correct. It's a statutory obligation for districts to have their contracts in place to receive a fund release. But that said, fund releases are an administrative act. Those are, this board approves the allocations, and under normal times, those requests for funds come into my office, and we manage those and move them on a flow basis over to the controller's office. We're going through this recertification. We can make some accommodations for substantial districts that may have dozens of projects in the pipeline, and I'm sure we can come up with a solution that works well for them. And the good news with the sale of this most recent set of bonds, I think that provides us a lot more flexibility in order to try to keep folks in place and hold them harmless as they get themselves back into contract. So if we find that that's a problem. So I think that provides us a lot of flexibility. There was.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Rob.
Well, there was a fair amount of concern that we had a limited sum of money, and those folks, there are lots of districts out there, I hear from them every day, that have very pressing obligations. They are looking at alternative financing means to keep their head above water, and it's absolutely essential on our part that we certainly try to get money into the hands of those who are in serious need of those funds as quickly as we could.
Rob, I just want to make sure, are you saying that there are no regulations that we could amend or adopt that would address the issue of somebody that had come out of contract and was not in contract right now vis-a-vis getting these funds? If they had been in contract because of the delay in funding, because of the budget crisis and the inability to sell bonds, they got out of contract through no fault of their own, but now we have money.
Mm-hmm.
Is there so the concern that one of the concerns I'm hearing is, through no fault of their own, they got out of contract, and now they're going to have to get back into contract. In other words, they're going to have to go through a couple more steps before they can get a fund release. Is there anything that you're aware of, short of amending a bill, that would allow us to address that issue now?
What I'm envisioning, of course, we're doing this on the fly. I think we can manage this administratively. I don't believe that there are actually any regulations that we would have to amend. It would be my staff working with those individual districts that have a fund release before us that may not be, they can't recertify, that we could potentially work with them till they have their contracts in place. I said the most recent sale of bonds probably provides us that luxury.
Flexibility.
Right.
Not luxury. Flexibility. Yeah. Ms. Moore, what's your pleasure on this item? I mean, I think it's an important point you raise.
What I would just like to see is that we do not injure any district that may be in line for funding because they have withdrawn a contract due to the circumstances of this. So if Mr. Cook, if you're saying that there won't be anyone injured like that, I take you at we take you at your word, and we move forward. But perhaps in order for the board to have the information, maybe if you're saying 80% sent their stuff back immediately and off they go, great. Tell us who may have a problem, and I think that they deserve our attention.
Rob, I'm going to ask you to put an item on for our next meeting, a report of all of these districts that you reach out to that have qualified for funding and that you've asked for the recertification. The board member, I and the board would like a report on how many of them have got taken care of it right away, how many of them had problems, and what the status are if those problems have been able to be worked out. In other words, we'd like to have a status report to know and to feel comfortable that we're not causing any harm to any school districts where we might be able to take some sort of other action. In other words, give us a status report on this specific issue. Hopefully you'll come back in a month and say everybody's been taken care of, but if that's not the case, we would like to know the nitty-gritty specifics of who has and who hasn't.
Well, you just announced my preferred report for next month, so, but yes, we will.
Well, I'm glad I thought of it, Rob.
Yes, thank you.
Now, do we have any other questions or comments from board members? We're going to have a shorter meeting today. We're going to probably need to adjourn by 6 o'clock. We're going to go into closed session at 5:30, so we've got about 45 minutes. If we could take up the consent calendar and if we could also take up our special consent items, at least clear those out, we might be able to take on one of the other appeals that'll require more discussion. So who is going to present us the consent calendar today?
The consent agenda is before you for your approval.
Are there any requests by board members to remove any of the items from the consent calendar today?
I would move approval.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Rob, tab 5 was going to be a status of funds report. We've covered a lot of ground in that vein. Is there anything that's really important that we haven't covered? We talked about the bond sales. We talked about the fund releases.
Right. I would offer it as informational for the board at this time in the
Any board members have any more questions about fund issues at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to tab 6. Rob, who's going to present item number 6?
Masha, would you step forward, please? Masha Lutzuk of our staff will be presenting that item. This is an item regarding relocatable funds available from the relocatable program.
I got it. Is it on? Oh, okay. Thank you. This item in front of you is a report that we have been requested by the board to provide on an annual basis regarding the funds available from the State Relocatable Classroom Program. The exercise that we go through on page 134 is to indicate the estimated and actual revenues for the program as well as expenses to come to a number which is currently $4,096,945 that is available for transfer, which represents the excess amount that is not needed to operate the program. And one important note here for you today is the existing control section in the 2008-2009 Budget Act that provides for the transfer of these funds into the general fund. And with that, just trying to keep the presentation short, I'd be happy to address any questions that you have.
Questions of staff, Senator Lowenthal.
My understanding, we're on item 6, right, the relocatable, that in the past, when these monies have been swept before, up, that the state allocation board made it clear that if this was going to happen again, that it should be an action item before the board, so that they should, and that last year when they did the $16 million, it was an action item before the board. How come this year it's never been an action item before the board?
This is the action item before.
So if we voted no now?
Well,
I
we
think
have
that's what an action item means.
We have the situation where this is actual budget control language that was enacted in the budget enacted in September.
Rob, I'm going to ask Ms. Oropeza to give us a technical explanation of how this works. I believe, Senator, that the Budget Act of 08 that was passed by the legislature and the governor included a control section that required these funds to be swept in the general fund because of our budget deficit. But Jeannie, could you give us an update on that?
The center of it right there.
Down. Jeannie Oropeza, Department of Finance. Historically, we've had a control section at the back of the Budget Act that allows us to transfer monies from this account into the general fund. We had been making the transfer for at least 7 years before the issue was initially raised as to why we were transferring the money to the general fund. I think now more than ever the decision was made that we really didn't have a choice as to whether or not we wanted to make the transfer or allow the board to spend it in other ways. This simply means that we make additional cuts in other areas of the general fund budget.
I understand all that and the need, but I thought last year or before, the state allocation board did indicate that they should be notified before this should happen. It should be an action item. Last year there was an action item. This year we're doing the same thing, but there never was an action item. Why weren't we notified?
I can't tell you why it wasn't brought before the board. I can tell you it was a rather unique circumstance with a budget that we actually enacted 2 budgets, and we enacted the 9-10 budget prior to when we normally process the budget. So it just may have been a timing issue with that. I don't think it was an intentional action to not allow the board to take a vote. And the budget is still before you, obviously, so if you choose to try and reverse that action, it's still an option that you have.
We could vote not to transfer the $4 million?
And you would have to make a budget change as we go through the budget process to undo that transfer in the Budget Act.
Senator Lowenthal, this item is on the agenda today. This body could take a vote today voting to, we'd have to get some help from SAB, but basically voting to reject that policy, and then we'd have to, there'd need to be a request of the Senate Budget Committee and the Assembly Budget Committee to put an amendment in to the package of bills that were passed in February.
And I don't think that's really what I was. I just find it difficult when last year, when the board was notified before the action took place and did take a vote to transfer that money, that was not communicated to this board this year, and the action was done, and after it's all been done, now we're being told.
I think, again, and I can't point to why it was brought at a later date, but I think it was the uniqueness of how the budget was passed and how it was passed in February rather than in July. I don't think it was an intentional action by the OPSC staff or the Department of Finance.
Actually, if I can provide clarity on that. One, we had an unusually late budget in September. We are bringing this item forward before you at approximately the same time as we did last year before the board. The board took an affirmative action last year at this time to release those funds, given that it was going to be a tough budget year.
Right.
But there was no budget control language in place at that time, and it was a voluntary action by this board at that time without any external forces acting upon it.
But the board had stated that they really wanted to have that ability to do that.
Absolutely, and has made that statement for the last couple of years that I can recall. In this instance, this budget control language was enacted without, it's part of the September budget that was enacted. Like I said, we're bringing this item forward at roughly the same time as we did last year to at least discuss it before the board. And as Jeannie has indicated, the budget is open. So.
I'm sorry. I know Mr. Harvey's going to be next, but I'm confused. Is this in response to the Budget Act of '08, the bills that were passed in September, or was this in response to the Budget Act of '09, for which we passed a package of bills in February? Which is it?
This was enacted in the September budget and was contained in the February budget as well.
I think this transfer would be made for the 9-10 fiscal year. If the board doesn't spend the money, we would be transferring it in 9-10.
Okay. Mr. Harvey.
Let me see if I can come at this a different way. We get to offset the fund with operating costs, correct? Do we have any flexibility to put other operating costs against this, thus freeing up other funds to go to schools directly?
These are non-bond funds. We've identified the costs that are appropriately against the state relocatable classroom program, and that's what you have. That's what you have before you.
How about some of your other operating costs, like this letter you're putting out? I'm trying to be creative so that if this could be used to benefit us, since it was our dollars at one time, could we do it and save dollars in another category for another legitimate purpose?
Some of these funds that are broken out for you on page 134 are actually going to be funds that are going to go to school district as reimbursement for their costs of setting up the state relocatable classrooms that are still being leased. So some of this money is going to go directly to school districts as reimbursement of their costs, and everything else that we've put in there, we've estimated with a good amount of cushion for us to make sure that we cover all of our expenses. So if anything additional, if we find anything additional, be rather minimal, I think, as far as.
So what you're telling me is that if we've got a cushion in there, it's more likely we'll transfer more than the $4 million to the general fund. You know where I'm trying to go with this. I'm trying to keep these dollars under our control and under our use so that it's consistent with the board's direction last time to say, let us know. We may choose not to have this transfer. Our hands got tied by budget control language. I don't know if there's another way of using these dollars for our purpose. That's all I'm asking.
Rob, is there historically, obviously this was it's been an extraordinary year so far, but historically, is there a reason why April was picked? People thought that April was a good month because it was before the May revise and it's before the budget. Is that why this was normally done in April? I mean, the intent historically has been to have this discussion in April so this body could weigh in before the budget got finalized. Was that the intent?
That's correct.
Okay. So this year, we get the budget package in February, so we got preempted. I think some of the board members feel, rightfully so, that they got completely cut out of the process this year. And I'm pretty well convinced it wasn't intentional by finance or OPSC, but nevertheless it happened. So is there any reason why we couldn't, going forward, to try to avoid having that happen again, have this item be a January item? We've never had a budget enacted 6 months early. And if we had this in January, then we could weigh in, in the very first month of the year. Is there any procedural or technical reason why we couldn't do that?
Tom? I would
Jeannie?
suggest it be December so that if we're putting together the budget, we
December?
know whether or not to include the
Okay, that's an even
control
better
section.
suggestion. So we can send a signal to the Department of Finance what the State Allocation Board's intention is for this funding. And Jeannie, are you, so that's your recommendation then, to accomplish that objective?
I think it would allow the board to make a decision prior to us putting a budget out, if
Okay.
that's
So
what I'm hearing.
if there's no objections from the board members, I want to formally request then going forward that this funding and this item, rather than being presented in the spring, be presented in December with the specific intention of signaling the Department of Finance and the budget writers what the intention is of this body. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order. Ms. Moore.
Additionally, I didn't know, I kind of wanted to recollect what happened last year, and I pulled up the old last year's agenda item, which shows the Education Code authority of the board may transfer any funds. So I think in terms of approving this item with what Mr. Sheehy said, I think we should list the authority, additional, the Education Code authority, and in fact amend this item to show there is an Education Code authority together with the budget summary as the authority. And then it appears that we do not have, I mean, we're kind of hands tied, that we actually take the action to approve, because it's not clear to me in the recommendation, is it 8 million, is it 4 million? It's the excess, which is 4 million, correct?
That's correct.
That we take the action to approve the excess because our hands are essentially tied. It's already been done unless we want to unravel budget language, correct? And that next year, it's imperative that the board takes the action because we could take the action to say we want that 4 million to go to critically hardship school projects, and we are precluded from that this year unless we unravel the budget issue. That's included in the item.
That request is to, I'm sorry, I didn't quite.
Place, I think, amend this item to indicate that there is an Education Code authority of the State Allocation Board so that anybody looking at this item next year sees the trail. Because the trail from last year was the authority is in Ed Code. And then it is the board's action that provides any, the decision around any excess funds and where they may go. And options, I think, around that. We are in extraordinary times, and I'm sure the general fund does need this funding. But so we have that, the authority, and then our recommendation is the 4 million. So it's clear that that's the excess this year.
Okay, hold on.
Together with Mr. Sheehy's, we'll
Request.
visit this in December.
Okay, so that's great. Now I'm just wondering, we want to get this item revised to reflect the information you just requested. Would it therefore be helpful if we just simply bring this item back to the next meeting as amended and vote on it then? That leaves all of our options open.
That's fine.
Rob, can you take care of that then? As
No.
part of this request, that have the
Certainly.
item amended as Ms. Moore requested?
Certainly.
And that way, when we vote, yeah, then we'll have a clear trail. Okay, very good.
I'm willing to, there we go. I'm wondering if the board would be willing to accommodate me in taking one item up now. I know we want to finish early, but I'm going to have to leave at about 5:30. And the item I'm talking about is on the special appeals, the Glendale Unified Los Angeles appeal.
Because that's going to involve a lot of discussion, and we have 4 items we can dispense with right now that I believe are going to be non-controversial.
Okay.
Would it be okay if we try to take up the consent special first? And unless there's any request by one of the board members to remove either item 7, 8, 9, or 10, we could vote on those all at once, because those are meant to be
Sure.
non-controversial. Is there anybody in the audience today that wanted to present on one of those items? I think we're prepared. I think the staff has recommended approval on all of those. So unless somebody had a concern, we could take care of that business right now. Rob, did you want to say anything about our consent special items, number 7, 8, 9, and 10?
Nothing in particular.
I'll move approval of the consent
Moore
specials.
moves approval.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Consent specials are approved. Senator Wyland has requested that we move to the Glendale item. Is that item number 14? Is that agreeable to the board? Hearing no objection, Rob, can you please present item number 14?
Yeah, I'll have Josh Damath of our staff present the Glendale item.
Okay, I'd like to say thank you to the members of the board for allowing me to present. My name is Josh Damath. I'm a Policy and Specials Analyst at the Office of Public School Construction. I'm presenting to you the Glendale Unified School District's appeal request to receive reimbursement funding for the Crescenta Valley new construction project that was occupied in fall of 2002. Before I get into the facts of the appeal, I'd like to briefly lay out the critical facts of the board's consideration before reviewing the 4 options presented by staff. Before doing that, please allow me to quickly describe how new construction program eligibility is calculated. Eligibility is a foundational component of the school facility program. In order for a school district to apply for new construction funding, it must first demonstrate to the state an ongoing need to house new pupils. Eligibility is calculated by subtracting the existing classroom capacity of a district from a 5-year projection of the enrollment. If the end result is a positive number, then the state may fund a new construction project. If the end result is a negative number, then there is sufficient housing for the pupils within the district and the state cannot fund a new construction project. So with that, I'd like to just I'd like to say that prior to the completion of this presentation and report, staff has met with the district on several occasions, and we believe that we are in agreement concerning the facts and history of this appeal request. First, so bear with me if I just go as I go through a few of these facts. First, the board approved the district's new construction eligibility in May of 2001. This approved eligibility consisted of the projected enrollment and the classroom inventory that existed in April of 2000. The classrooms in the project that is the subject of this appeal, Crescenta Valley, these classrooms were included in the classroom inventory. They were included based on a belief that the construction contracts for the project were signed in December of 1999. Then, in September of 2001, the district submitted an appeal to exclude the classrooms from the new construction eligibility, already approved by this board. This appeal also requested to exclude classrooms from 2 other schools. The district submitted construction contracts for all 3 schools with their appeal. The contracts submitted for the Crescenta Valley School were incorrect, which led the district to withdraw their appeal to their own detriment. A subsequent appeal was submitted and approved by the State Allocation Board to exclude the classrooms from the other 2 schools from the new construction eligibility. The Crescenta Valley was left off of this subsequent appeal. Later, in September of 2007, Glendale submitted the appeal request that I'm presenting to you, asking the board to reinstate its original 2001 appeal to exclude the classrooms constructed in this project from its classroom inventory, and then subsequently to approve funding for the Crescenta Valley project. New construction contracts were submitted dated August of 2000. The new documentation submitted has been reviewed by staff, and it appears that the December 1999 contracts were in fact incorrect. Before presenting options, I'm going to give you a brief history of the funding applications that were submitted to OPSC. It is important to note that the new classrooms for the Crescenta Valley High were occupied in fall of 2002. The first funding application came in December of 2000. This application was withdrawn by the district for reasons unrelated to this appeal. Next, in January of 2001, a funding application was resubmitted. Staff returned this application to the district in March of 2001 because the classrooms in the project were already included in the new construction eligibility, which was approved by the board. Finally, in November of 2004, the district submitted another funding application for the project pursuant to the provisions of Regulation Section 1859.70.2. However, this application was returned because it did not meet a key provision of the section. The section requires the school district to demonstrate current eligibility for new construction funding at the time the request is submitted. Glendale did not meet this requirement because of overall declining enrollment, and because of 3 other new construction projects for which they had received approximately $20 million in state funding. Options. Staff has presented 4 options for the board's consideration of this appeal. Staff believes that options 1 and 4 are viable. Under option 1, the district's 2001 appeal could be reinstated and approved to restore 297 pupils to the district based on the updated documentation that they submitted. Staff has presented proposed actions in option 1 for the board's consideration. The proposed actions noted would make the board's finding narrow and specific to this case, so as not to set a precedent for excluding facilities to other school districts. Option 2 is presented for the board to deny the district's appeal request altogether. If the board selects this option, no further action would be needed. Now let me allow to speak to option 3, which is to basically grant their appeal to reimburse the district for costs associated with the Crescenta project. This project has been occupied since fall of 2002. The SFP requirements set forth in the bond covenant, the statutes, and the SFP regulations state very clearly that projects already housing pupils are ineligible for Green Act new construction funds. Funding applications submitted to the OPSC after the date of occupancy are returned unfunded to school districts. In addition, the Glendale Unified School District has a current high school 912 eligibility of negative 960 pupils. To fund this project would disadvantage other school districts that have complied with statute, denying them access to limited state resources. For these reasons, staff does not recommend option 3. Finally, in addition to option 1, staff does recommend that the board could select option 4. Potentially, the project could receive funding through a legislative appropriation. This would reimburse funding to the district. However, the source of this funding would need to be determined by the legislature. And this concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions because this is a complicated appeal. So,
Thanks, Josh,
Yep.
for the presentation. Senator Lowenthal? There are questions by board members? Senator Weiland?
Well, I assume there's other testimony. I know we have the superintendent here.
Sure.
So perhaps we should start with that. I will tell you that just in general, that I think option 3 is the best, frankly. And just as a general principle, in my own experience, especially with those districts that are not very, very big, it is difficult sometimes to comply perfectly with every rule. I know from my own experience on the school board, we often do not have people with it takes a great deal of expertise, what I'm trying to say, to comply with each one of these things. And often school districts, in good faith, make errors. And that's sort of, in general, the way I look at this one. Although I recognize the cons, and I do think we have to look at them in each individual case, I think this was a good faith effort, frankly.
Thank you, Senator Weiland. Unless another board member would like to be recognized right now, can we hear from the district?
Let's see if we can keep this in simplicity as we were trying to do earlier. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Escalante, and I serve as superintendent of the Glendale Unified School District. And I want to thank Chairman Sheehy and members of the State Allocation Board and OPSC staff for the opportunity of clearing up an issue that really has taken way too long to be addressed. Through the years, this project really has taken many, many twists and turns, and you have volumes of paperwork which make it incredibly confusing. But the fundamental issues really haven't changed, and that is, when this project was originally set out in 2000, it met all the requirements. It met all of the requirements that were needed in 2000. And this project never has been funded. So the request really is quite simple. We're requesting that a technical correction be allowed so that Crescenta Valley High School project be approved based on eligibility at the time of the original application in 2000. This decision really would be consistent with the State Allocations Board of 2002 when 2 of our other projects were approved and baseline eligibility concerns were addressed at that time. Unfortunately, in 2002, the district made an error, and that was we submitted the wrong contract. Now, you would believe over a period of time we would be able to correct that quite simply. If the correct contract for this multi-prime project would have been submitted in 2002, it would have been forwarded to the State Allocation Board with the other 2 appeals, and it would have been approved. Our appeal is based on a technical correction to documents that were previously submitted, and this is not precedent setting. When the original application was filed, the following situations existed. First of all, the district had eligibility. There's no question about that. The funding application was submitted, secondly, within the 180 days of the signing of the construction contract. The building was not occupied in 2000. We were just beginning construction. The district has never received funding for this eligibility, and we're not double dipping. So let's clearly understand that. So in an effort to complete this project, what we had to do is go back and borrow from our bond funds in order to keep this project moving along, which has really shortcut other projects along the way. As our bond projects are really coming to completion, we now need reimbursement in order to maintain the promises we made to the kids and to the staff and to the community to fulfill all the projects that were originally supported by our voters. So what we really need to do with that money is we need to do things like complete the HVAC project at Hoover High School and Glendale High School, and it's absolutely necessary in order to do a quality job on that project. So really help us correct years of confusion and really years of frustration. Glendale is simply requesting that the original application be approved. So myself and my staff, we're all here to answer any questions you might have. And I think I only took 2 minutes, so that's simplicity.
Thank you, Mr. Escalante, for a succinct but thorough review of your appeal. We really appreciate that. I have a question. Is there a reason why Glendale waited 8 years to bring this before us?
No, it didn't wait 8 years. There were numerous occasions. In fact, we have a whole timeline that we could provide you of all the different appeals. And Eva,
this specific appeal's been before this board before?
No, it never came to the board for appeal. It went through the administrative process.
Oh, meaning, oh, okay. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Certainly. Eva Luke, Chief Business Official for Glendale Unified.
Welcome.
And the challenge has been that when it was discovered that it was the incorrect contract that was submitted back in the 2001-2002 appeal, staff worked with the OPSC staff in trying to see how that wrong could be righted. And in 04-05 was when there was a grandfathering period, I believe, put in, and districts were coming forward. So it was an opportunity to bring this back again. At that point in time, unfortunately, it was viewed as a new application, and the district was advised that there wasn't eligibility for a new application. It wasn't viewed as an appeal of an original application.
Is that because you had withdrawn it?
There's a little bit of controversy over whether it was withdrawn or revoked.
Can you tell us a little bit about that controversy? I'd be interested in knowing about it.
When the original application was submitted in December of 2000, it was determined by OPSC that baseline eligibility for the district had not been established. And that was back at the time when the new bond issue passed and everybody in the state had to establish baseline. So at that point in time, it was, I don't know if I have the correct term, but it was rejected. It was returned, saying that we did not have baseline established. That was an issue with 3 of our school sites under construction. That came forward on an appeal process, and so, you know, we submitted our baseline papers in April of 2000.
There was some confusion. It was agreed by the State Allocation Board in 2002 that it was substantially complete, the baseline eligibility, in April of 2000. So any contracts signed after that date were appropriate. Then we did inadvertently submit a wrong contract. We submitted a contract for our gymnasium on that same campus. That was a 1999 date. OPSC staff and district staff both agreed that was outside of the date order that was appropriate during that appeal process. So we agreed to withdraw that appeal. Whether that means that we withdrew an application or revoked an application, I don't know that technical term.
But you did actually withdraw that appeal at that time because
we withdrew that appeal.
You had the wrong date in the contract.
Correct.
I see.
And you know, and that may sound a bit odd, and as I look back through the records, this was rebuilding an entire high school campus, and it was done in 3 phases. Multiple prime. In the first 2 phases of loan, there were over 60 contracts. And so when they were pulling the contract to go with the appeal, and it was a very hectic time, they pulled the gymnasium contract. It was for concrete work. And it was our error. It was absolutely our error at that time. We have gone back through. We've documented the correct contract. We've documented our DSA dates. All of that we're in agreement with the staff of OPSC.
Mr. Harvey.
As a follow-up to the withdrawal in May of '02.
Yes.
You indicate that you were aware at that point that there was an incorrect contract.
We were not. We believe, we looked at the contract date, staff, OPSC staff and district, and it was, the date on it was April 1999. I don't know if it was April, but it was a 1999 date, and we had agreed with the staff that our baseline eligibility was to be established in April of 2000. So that construction contract with a 1999 date was clearly outside of what was appropriate to come forward in the appeal.
I guess what I'm getting to, since you didn't occupy until the following fall, and you still had the spring and summer, why wasn't the proper contract attached in an appeal immediately sought at that point in time?
You know, I've been with the district 2.5 years, and I honestly don't know when it was discovered that there was an incorrect contract. I know it was before the 2004 date, and it was after the 2002 date. I'm not sure exactly when that occurred.
I guess I'm still struggling with why you withdrew in May '02, because that seems to be the act which keeps you out of the proper finding in law, which is you can't occupy a classroom and then after the fact get reimbursement for new construction. So I'm again trying to figure out what kept you from getting the proper form, the proper contract in prior to the fall of '02 when you occupied Crescenta Valley.
I don't know.
We were not there. Neither of us were there at that
I
time.
apologize. I don't know if there's anything in the OPSC documents. I know there were a lot of discussions back and forth between both staffs, but I don't have clarity on that item for you.
Thank you. I have a question of staff. I hear the need that the district has to backfill what they had to borrow from their bonds. If we give them reimbursement for this Crescenta Valley project, they're free to use it on other school facility needs?
Well, at this point, I mean, the bills have obviously been paid for some time, or you guys are in arrears for, but that's, I'm sure those have been paid. Those funds would be capital funds that it would be available to the district for another high priority capital purpose is what it would amount to.
So they can do it. Here they are asking for money to reimburse them for a Crescenta Valley High School classroom. They spent the money, contracts are paid, we give them the appeal, and they can use it for a high priority capital improvement, something else entirely different from what the appeal is based on.
I'd actually ask legal counsel to weigh in on that question.
The difficulty is there's an the concept of how the school facilities program is supposed to work is it's supposed to go to fund new construction for school facilities that are not yet housed. Once they're housed, then it becomes a reimbursement, and that's not something that's allowed under this program. That's kind of the difficulties that the Attorney General's office expressed in an opinion that they provided to this board.
If I could just comment, districts are reimbursed all the time for our construction expenses that we pay out of our local funds. That's just part of the timing of what needs to occur. So from our perspective, it would be a reimbursement of our GO bonds, a very late reimbursement, but it would be a reimbursement, and that we would spend it on another capital project. Just for clarification, we withdrew our appeal in 2002. We didn't withdraw our application, and I think that is a bit of a difference.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we weren't giving a gift of public funds by virtue of giving you these dollars, if indeed that's what the board does, and you put them into a use other than Crescento Valley.
And that's the concern that the Attorney General's office raised, is that's what in effect happens when you're, the problem is they can reimburse their own funds prior to occupancy. Once occupancy is, once the schools are occupied by the schools, it then drops out of the program, or at least that's what the opinion was.
Henry, is your understanding that that's a statutory requirement or a regulatory requirement?
A statutory, and also it's a bond covenant. So potentially.
Bond covenant as well? What did the bond covenant say?
Essentially, the bond covenants specify what the use of the bonds are for. Again, paraphrasing what the Attorney General's office opinion was based on is the fact that it's outside of the bond covenants because for new construction, the SFP program does not allow reimbursement of a school facility once it's occupied because there's no longer a need to house unhoused pupils.
I want to say that I know that I'm not sure that we're going to have this matter resolved today for a couple reasons. Number one, we're going to go into closed session in 5 minutes because we really have to deal with our personnel issues, since we're going to lose some members. And I'm not sure that we're going to, even in 5 minutes, I don't know that we have enough time to finish discussing all the issues, and we don't have all of our members here either, which may be important. But I would like to just say that my review of this indicates a lot of legal issues, and I don't know whether your appeal will be approved or not by this body. But I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned about some of the legal implications if, in fact, your appeal is approved. And I want to just say for the record, whether your appeal is approved or not approved by this body, I'm going to draft under my own request and my own signature a letter to the Attorney General's office asking for an opinion on this matter, not because of Glendale per se. And by the way, I'm going to CC that to every member on the board to be completely transparent. But I want to make sure if we're going to reverse actions that happened 8 years ago, that we're not opening up the door to a lot of other issues that happened 8, 9, or I don't know how far back we go. It's going to be a year from now before we ever get anything from the Attorney General, but I think it would be helpful to have that because I just think we all need to have the same information and know if it's a statutory thing, what can we and can we not do. And so I realize that you may in fact get your appeal approved today or next month when we take it up again if we can't finish it today. But I really think it's important we have something on the record that we can all look at. Ms. Moore.
Well, I'm concerned about requesting another opinion of the AG. And I don't know the rules around that, whether an individual board member can do that, or if it's an agreed of the state allocation board. But we have gone to the AG. We have 3 opinions on this from the AGs. We have 3 opinions from the AG on a similar item, 2 of which I think in each AG opinion, Glendale's is mentioned, and I don't know that for absolute fact, but we visited this issue 3 times now with the AG, and I actually think we in closed session had on the 3rd time determined a direction that this is not in keeping with in my remembrance of that, and so I would have concerns about that. I think, and you're saying as an individual you can do that, but as a board I would want to vote on that.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I certainly don't want to take any action that would be considered preemptive of the prerogative of the board. So I appreciate your comments, Ms. Moore. Then I think it might be appropriate. I'm not familiar of any closed session briefing where the AG briefed us on the Glendale Unified School District issue. I was in the closed session in November. I remember there was a different subject then. There might have been other ones that I wasn't in. And I know that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members, new members on this board that weren't in any of those briefings. So I have no prejudice against this issue, and I'd like to see your appeal approved, but I'm very concerned about the legal implications. So if it is true, Henry, that we've got 3 AG opinions on this issue, perhaps we need to have the Attorney General come back in and talk about this.
Let me clarify. What we have here is 3 AG opinions. The first issue, or first opinion, dealt with not Glendale, but similar issues involving occupancy and funding after occupancy. The second AG opinion did involve Glendale, and that, I believe, is the briefing that Ms. Moore talked about. And then there was a third letter opinion where there was some concern because of some additional facts which called into question that second opinion. So that's kind of the history of the opinions that this board has received.
For my benefit, what was the time, for everybody's benefit, what was the timeline in those briefings? Were those briefings done with this configuration of the board, or were they done with some earlier board?
It was done with an earlier board.
Well, and I think I was at one of them.
That is correct.
But there were 2 other ones that took place where I wasn't on this body, correct?
There was at least one. I don't know if there was 2 others.
I don't want to belabor this point now. I'm just concerned about this issue because I want to make sure, going forward, that we don't continue to have disagreement over what we can and can't do legally. And there's some doubt in my mind what we can and can't do legally, and I'd like to have that doubt resolved so that we can all vote without having to worry about whether that's an issue. And
I'd just like to say I respect what you're trying to get at, and I think it is important to understand that. But as you said, it would take a long time. First of all, we'd have to agree. I think if we wanted another opinion, we'd have to look at the ones that have already been done. From my point of view, I would actually like to move today that we adopt option 3, and we'll see what happens. Subsequently, obviously, we'll have to take a look at these issues. But my take on this is that there was an attempt at compliance, an error made, and that we should go ahead and reimburse them.
So that would Senator Weiland has moved approval of option number 3. Is that right, Senator? Correct. Okay. Do we have a second? We have a second by Senator Lowenthal. Do we want to have a vote now? We've got a couple minutes left before the 5:30 witching hour. Mr. Harvey, do you want to?
I do have
Senator Hancock.
some comments I'd like to make, Mr. Sheehy, and that is because I believe in flexibility in these things, and I kind of think maybe we need a mercy clause or something because really of the pressure that the administration of the state is under and the pressure that school districts are under to provide accurate data in different situations. In the absence of that, as a new board member, I have to say that I'm concerned with the long-term policy implications if we're basically going to grant every request for whoops, we made a mistake and so let's just move on. I need to understand sort of the policy impact of that, and unfortunately I just don't think I do. So I'm not going to be able to vote on that today. I'd like to know how many of these appeals do we hear in a year? Do we generally always grant them? We granted the last one a couple of meetings ago that was contentious. Why then, what kind of a precedent would we be setting or not setting? Are these fairly rare considering the administrative pressures that school districts are under? But I'm not comfortable taking action today. There may be a majority of the board that is, but I want
Chair Sheehy, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, just so the board members are aware, there is some question as to whether the Attorney General's opinion squarely still meets the facts as presented by Glendale. But that being said, the ramifications of granting the appeal, if it's later found to be in violation of bond covenants, is there would be a duty on this board to go make the bond funds whole, which means we would have to, at that time, go back to the school district and recover those funds that were given with interest, and we would not have any flexibility in not doing that. So,
okay, well, nobody wants to do that.
Right.
That's and Senator Hancock, thank you for that. I share the concern. Look, I was here in October. And I was here for the closed session in November, and I know everything that took place. And but notwithstanding, I don't feel I understand this well enough. I'm with you, Senator Hancock. I don't feel I understand this well enough to be comfortable. I am concerned about precedent setting and opening up the door to a number of other appeals, and I just want to make sure that we're on firm, solid legal ground, whatever the decision of this body is. I'd like to see your issue, Mr. Escalante, taken care of, because I'm sure you could put that money to good use in your district. But I can't, with my fiduciary responsibility, vote to approve the appeal for that funding if there's a significant chance that we're going against state statute, and I'm not convinced that we're not doing that. So I really would like to have more information. I'm certainly, Ms. Moore, going to take your comments to heart, and I'm not going to do anything that would preempt this body from asking or not asking for an opinion. But one way or another, I think it would be helpful, because these board members, most of you are going to be here longer than I am, because you're not going to term out in a year and a half. But I think it'd be helpful for us all to know going forward what we can and can't do legally, and I think there is some question here. Ms. Fuller.
I'm sorry, but I just have to say two things. The first is that, correct me if I'm wrong, Henry, but this case is very parallel to the Davis case.
That is correct.
And we approved the Davis case.
That is correct.
And so if we have to take money back from Davis, we might just have to take it back from these guys, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so you guys know that, but you'd like to have consideration as soon as possible, because basically school districts need to have some certainty in their life. Is that right? Okay, so that's one. Two, I agree with Mrs. Hancock and you that we need to, as a whole, come to some agreement around when we have latitude to do an appeal and when not. But I think that the senator is right on when she says we need a mercy clause, because I know this district, and they're a district that does everything right in every area for as long as I've known them, regardless of which superintendent they have. And to me, if you put the wrong piece of paper on, but all your applications were lined up, and then just because you put the wrong contract out of 60 contracts on, but your application was still good, now you have to take the whole thing back, and you don't get to make any little errors, and your enrollment has declined now, so now you lose your whole project. I just think that's crazy. So to me, if that's what's going on here, number one is they put in an application, they had the eligibility. Some clerks stapled the wrong contract onto their deal. They all get it back. They all try to do the right thing. Nobody has a rule to fix it. And so at the bottom, they come into a review appeal, and at the appeal, somebody tells them to revoke it. They revoke it. Nobody even knows, because those people are all gone. You got to put the kids in school. They did not build this school and then say, "Oh, now we want some money." They applied to build the school. They wouldn't have built the school if they hadn't had the eligibility to start the school, because I know this district. They would not have done that. So anyway, let's do whatever it takes to get us all on the same page, but let's get a mercy clause, and let's not forget that we allowed Davis. And I was the one that wasn't all that excited about allowing Davis. Okay, now we did it. Okay, now these guys are just like Davis, more or less. So I guess I would bow to the wisdom of waiting 1 month, but not 6 months or 8 months. And I would want a complete analysis of how the Davis case and this case are parallel.
That's fine. Senator Weiland, do you still want to have the vote now?
I think I'd like to take the vote, assuming that that does not prejudice. I want to make sure that that is not a final decision, so that.
Well, if there's 6 votes here today to grant the option 3, their appeal, then I think we should take the vote and grant the appeal. I have no problem with that.
But if there are not, then I'd like to.
If there's not, then we'll bring it back to the next. If it's not, it just means that if it's not, it doesn't mean that they. Because we haven't adopted any rules along those lines, what it means is that
they can come back.
There's not 6 votes for a final. If there's 6 votes for a final action today, that'll be a final action. If there's not, they can come back at the next meeting.
Okay, I'm used to other sorts of rules that are prohibitive. So.
Just very briefly, I think our member Gene Fuller outlined the situation as I see it also, and it's all fundamentally about the children and their best welfare and the district's ability to provide for all their children, and I think they had no choice. This is sort of a technical error. They had to house those students, and here we are. So I'm for a mercy clause or error and omissions clause or something that doesn't allow rampant abuse of our system, but error like this where they had to take care of the kids and they need the money now to take care of more kids, I'm for voting for the kids.
Okay.
But I thought the discussion was about declining enrollment. Now, how does that come in? More kids. That was later on.
Well,
in other words, they wouldn't be eligible if they applied now, but they were eligible when they did apply, but the mistake was made.
Okay, was their whole application pulled and they had to start over, or was their application still good? They just had to put the right contract on.
Well, one thing's for sure. I think there's unanimous support here to have staff come back and report to the board on this mercy clause issue. What could be adopted either through regulation or statute, some sort of errors and omission thing, like Ms. Fuller said, if they had all their contracts lined up, everything was done, and there was a clerical error at the last minute. So if there's something that this body can do to provide, I don't know the right term, I like the mercy clause issue, then that would be very helpful, and I think that there'd be unanimous support for that. Now, Senator Weiland has a motion on the floor. Senator Lowenthal has seconded that motion. We're going to lose our members in 20 minutes, and we have very important closed session business to do. So if it's okay if there's no objection from the board members, why don't we have a vote? We have a motion to approve option number 3, and after that vote is concluded, then we'll need to adjourn the open session and move back into the closed session. Is that agreeable? Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve option number 3, which would, I think, is the option the district wants, right?
With the understanding it's sort of an amended motion that says to approve option 3, and if there are not sufficient votes, then to bring it back in a month.
If there are not sufficient votes, this item will automatically come back on the next agenda. We will have a full, fair hearing. Don't worry, Senator Weiland will make sure that happens. Ms. Page, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, Senator Lowenthal. Senator Hancock. Senator Weiland. Assemblymember Fuller. Aye. Assemblymember Torlakson. Aye. Scott Harvey. Kathleen Moore.
Aye.
Rosario Gerard. Tom Sheehy.
No.
The motion does not pass. It's 5-1 and 3 abstentions.
Let's make sure that this item is back on our docket for next month's hearing, and so we can have more discussion and another vote.
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
if
Senator
I could
Hancock.
just say, I would really like to see us set policy, because the last time this came up, as I remember, it was literally a clerk that had cancer and was undergoing chemotherapy and forgot to send something in, right? We don't want abuse, but I'll tell you, I also know some school districts that are under such pressure because they're bankrupt or something that they make mistakes sometimes. And I want to have a policy so that we will be able to recognize those things, but we won't lay ourselves open to kind of, doesn't matter what you do, you can come back and get a variance.
Rob Cook, are you hearing what Senator Hancock's saying? She is once again affirming we want to have some sort of policy on a mercy clause. So I want to have a full discussion of that at our next meeting. Mr. Duffy, we can take additional comments from you when we come out of closed session. I think we're going to lose our quorum. But if we have a quorum present, we could conduct more business. I just don't think we will, Tom. Folks, I'm not going to pre-guess what my colleagues are going to do, but I think we will lose some folks. So if you could all please clear the room, unless you are staff.